Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking with Yizz. She's part of the Liberalist. That's how I originally found her. She has a YouTube channel. She has a Gab, BitChute account, all that good stuff. So I'm going to leave that in the description. If you want to go ahead, just click on all of those buttons and hit subscribe for all of them. I highly recommend it. You will not be disappointed. So here is our chat here on last night's Democratic debate. This is the first debate of the 2020 election, day one. All right, so we're going to talk about the Dem debates.
Yes, we are.
And the first day, I guess, because this was just day one, and the second
I'm
day
looking
is
forward
tonight.
to tonight.
Yeah, it's tonight'll. Do you think tonight will be better in terms of both entertainment and just
Well, it depends on what you
substance?
mean by better. I don't know how they could top the grandiose amounts of virtue signaling waffle time that we had in last night, but maybe they'll top it tonight. When it comes to entertainment, I don't know if you can top last night with what's coming tonight because the people tonight are probably going to be a lot more boring in the ways that I find entertainment, which is, of course, vapid leftist drivel mixed with virtue signaling, mixed with not answering the question, mixed with waffling on, mixed with trying to just sabotage the people next to you instead of answering the damn question.
Right.
So I don't know if it's going to be any more entertaining tonight. I would probably say no, but I look forward to being surprised. I'm definitely going to watch it.
Yeah. So your expectations for last night was it better or worse? And again, however you want to define better or worse, was it better or worse than you expected before you watched it?
Uh, there were two things that were rather off of my expectations, and I'd like to hear your answer too.
Yeah.
But I'll go first. The two things that were far off from my projection or expectation or whatever was after all of the negative things and all of the biased things that I have read and seen clips of about Cory Booker, I was surprised at how, for a Democrat, how sort of based and normal and tepid a lot of his answers and speaking points were. So I suppose the most surprising thing that I didn't expect was how much I liked the sound of a lot of what Cory Booker said, which surprised me, honestly, because, of course, I get mostly skeptic, centrist, or right leaning news media because that's what I find funny and entertaining. So, of course, I went into this only having negative ideas about Cory Booker. But I was surprised at how much I liked a lot of what he had to say, even though I couldn't trust what he was saying, if that makes any sense.
Right, yeah, that makes
But
sense.
but the way that he spoke about, let's see, God, I've already forgotten so much of it. Um, I would like to be able to quote a specific here. Let me think. No, it's gone. I have a dumb trap brain. I'm sorry. But if I hadn't have murdered all my logic cells with estrogen, I might be able to answer this better. I'm sorry. But that's a joke, by the way. I don't really believe that. Um, but no, I can't cite a specific, sadly. I just can't conjure it this morning. But I remember being surprised at how he seemed to virtue signal less than most of the people up there. One of the other guys who I knew nothing about before the debate started, the Ohio guy, he didn't really virtue signal hardly at all either. And of course, Tulsi really didn't either, which I was proud of her. She didn't even respond to the wage gap shit. But regardless, moving back to Cory Booker, I suppose the thing that I found most surprising was how if I knew nothing about him going into this and had no bias from the media and the commentary and the comedy that I've already watched, I might have found him the most desirable after Tulsi. And that very much surprised me because I did not expect that level of sort of even keeled, I want to try to be based, moderate, centrist, sort of leaning from Mr. Booker. And I was surprised by that. So that really shocked me. The other thing that by far and beyond beat my expectations. Do you want me to continue
Yeah, go ahead.
to go, or do you want to talk? Okay. But then after this, I'll be quiet and let you talk. The second thing was just how brutal slanted against Tulsi everyone and the hosts were. Like I knew from absorbing the clips and the articles that MSNBC and CNN have put out about Tulsi. I knew that they didn't like her, but two times the hosts directly tried to sabotage Tulsi on purpose. And then several times through the debate, Elizabeth Warren, excuse me, Elizabeth Warren and somebody else who I can't remember exactly specifically tried to turn the subject matter around and make Tulsi look bad by cutting her off and bringing up something or making a subject change they thought she'd be weak against, which normally that's a typical debate tactic. I get it, but they didn't seem to do that to each other hardly at all, just Tulsi. And the most egregious example is when one of the hosts just opened up with this blunt statement of, "So Tulsi, I hear you hate the homos. What about that?"
Yeah, that
And
was
just
the
like,
only
and just like
major
dropped
attack
it right
question.
in her lap. And they didn't do that to any other debater on the stage.
No, I noticed that the very first question was probably the closest thing you could get to that, was when they asked Elizabeth Warren, like, okay, that obviously people have been happy under Trump. Why are you offering anything? Like, how can you offer something different when people are happy?
But
That
that's
was an
actually
actual.
constructive and not assaulting.
And when it came to the Tulsi question, it was just a flat out attack. Like, what about your past? Like, do you denounce your past? That kind of thing. It was basically explain yourself. The question. And I thought she handled it rather well, to be honest. She throughout the entire debate, I think she was the only one that stood really confident, or not the only one, but she, out of everyone else, she was the one that stood the most confident and very presidential looking. One that you could tell she was in the military.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I'm not saying I like the man, and I probably wouldn't if I studied him, but I thought Mr. Booker looked rather stately and well put together and spoke well like a president too. So
There was
again,
one moment that hurt him in that, just following the posts and the memes afterwards, I guess, which I didn't even notice during the debate, so the average person probably didn't notice it
I
either.
might not have either. What
Right.
was it?
I didn't notice it during the debate, but apparently when O'Rourke started speaking Spanish for the first time, Cory Booker has this like afraid, terrified, like, why didn't I think of that first, or how did
Oh
he do that
yeah.
before me? And I never noticed during the, so the average person probably didn't notice it either. But that's been spread all over the internet. So
Yeah,
for
I
the
saw
most
that
part, I
this
agree
morning,
with you.
and I didn't notice it either.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think overall he did the way he spoke, I think, was better than, besides Tulsi, he spoke better than the rest. But that one moment that I didn't even notice, apparently other people did. And
When it comes to that though, there was a lot of Spanish spoken. I'm assuming you watched the whole thing, right?
yeah,
At first, when I was trying to conjure it last night, I couldn't remember Cory Booker speaking any Spanish. Did he at any point?
he did once.
He did
I
once.
think it was
Okay.
just once. O'Rourke spoke Spanish, and then I
Yeah.
think Cory Booker did next, and then that was it for the rest of the debate for him. I
Okay,
think
so
he was the second person.
he just wanted to virtue signal with him. He's like, "Hey, look, I can do the old Espanol too, guys. What do you think about that?"
Pretty, and on the Spanish stuff, like I don't mind too much in that as a debate tactic. If you're someone as a Democratic candidate, I can understand, hey, it might be a good idea to throw one or two sentences in Spanish because the Spanish-speaking population that votes, that's going to go viral all over there. That's going to be the highlight of the debate because that's what's going to go around because they
And
can
also,
understand it.
don't forget, they were live casting on Telemundo also.
Yeah, I did notice that late. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
until about halfway through. So in that sense, yeah, that was, as a tactic, as a pure tactic, that wasn't so bad. But after about the
Correct.
fifth or sixth or seventh time, and they kept, even the debate moderator decided to join in. That I guess again that was because of Telemundo. But after that point, it just came across as cringy and annoying to me, at least.
Yeah, definitely. It came across as annoying to me too, and it might be because I don't know a lot about you personally. I'm probably a bit more of a nationalist than you, and I really find it insulting to pander that hard with a different language because to me doing that is going to instantly alienate millions of viewers that are just normal Americans. I think that it's such ridiculous, narrow-sided self-sabotage for anyone to want to just launch into a long Spanish diatribe, whether or not that's representative of the people that vote for you or not. The whole point of these debates is to snag people that don't already want to vote for you. And I just felt like that was just the most narrow-sided shooting yourself in the foot shit ever when you're trying to get people who don't already know about you or don't already support you to vote for you and support for you. I thought that was just a completely stupid, boneheaded move. But maybe that's just because I'm a nationalist and sort of a right-leaning libertarian type. I don't know, but
But
That's
that's
just
something I've probably come around to actually in recent years. Where a year ago, or probably 2 3 years ago, if you asked me that, I wouldn't have been bothered in the slightest. But now, as I'm getting into the more nationalist stuff, I do understand that hey, like it is kind of insulting to a lot of people, and at least like I'm from the Northeast and around
uh-huh.
central Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how it is in the Southwest in the more Hispanic speaking areas, but or in the
Well, I
more like
lived in
leftist areas. But
uh-huh.
for me, like the Democrats that I know, the more left leaning people I know, especially in
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia and like in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey, which is where Cory Booker's from in New Jersey, a lot of the
Uh-huh.
Democrats there are very patriotic. They're very like pro American. Now that means something a bit different to them, but if you
Yeah.
word things in that language of just yeah, like America is great, that's something that like they're not America hating. They actually really appreciate that. So that's something that
Cool.
I think made Cory Booker look better, is because that's where he's from. He's used to the very like patriotic left wing style, and that works to his benefit, I think, for the average person.
Since a lot of your viewers might not know me, when I say that I'm more of a center right leaning person, that doesn't really mean that I like Republicans or conservatism, because I don't. It's just the Overton window shifted so far left now. My views on economic policy and being anti-war and the social policies and things that I've liked and supported for years haven't really changed. It's just the discussion around them have changed so much that pretty much everything that I hold dear and want to talk about is kind of is pretty much only a right wing talking point now, and that sort of by default makes me part of the right or right leaning even when I never chose to be. Like it's a weird place for someone like me who's like a queer tranny previous left leaning person to be in, because I never really planned to be here. So it's I don't know. So when I say right leaning, I just mean because of how the dialogue has shifted, not because I have a particular affinity towards conservatism or the Republican Party, because I certainly don't.
Well, that's what we found for a lot of people in recent years. But the pretty much the ideology of the mainstream shifts in a certain direction, and then leaves a lot of people behind, and they're like, well, I guess I'm part of this group now in a sense by default, just because the other group has kind of left them, even though they're not really part of that group in a sense. They just find themselves allied with it,
Hmm.
and that's what that seems to be now. So Cory Booker, as we said, did probably the best. I did notice 2 times he did talk about, like he said, American values twice. I believe it's twice, and he did talk about. He was the only one to ever mention the free market, which that's something you'd find
Oh,
mentioned
I do
in
remember that. I
yeah
do remember that. Yeah, that's one of the things that made me like him is, I was expecting just a bunch of, uh, you know, self-aggrandizing, virtue signaling, and leftist talking points, and to actually hear free market come out of somebody's mouth, I was like, oh shit, I should pay attention to this and actually listen.
yeah. My greatest criticism of most Republicans, honestly, is that they say the free market stuff and then they don't actually follow up on it. Whereas on the left,
Exactly. That's
they're
one of
not
my main
really.
gripes with Republicans as well. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah,
Like,
whereas on
oh, free
the
market, free market, free market. Now let's give all the billionaires and megacorps all the power and money.
exactly. So at the very least, on the right, they know that that's what their audience wants. Like if you bring
Yeah.
up American values, free markets,
Hmm.
capitalism, regardless of it, whether you actually follow on it once you get elected, that's what the
Hmm.
people want when you're trying to get elected. And it was
Hmm.
interesting to see how generally on the left or on the Democratic Party, the equivalent of that is income inequality, the 1%, like the working class and that. And Cory Booker did frame it in the more, like I said, the more
Hmm.
patriotic, the more he actually said the word free market as a good thing.
And on that line, I also really liked. I don't know his whole name, but I think his last name's Ryan, the Ohio guy.
Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan. I like the Ohio guy because he also didn't go very socialist leftist with a lot of his points about jobs, work, industry, because it felt like he was couching it in a make America great MAGA way of we need to focus on building industry and getting jobs by Americans for Americans and that kind of shit. Which in a lot of ways, that's like, a third of the MAGA platform back in 2015 and 2016.
Right.
So I think that was good and also wise since he wants to continue holding office in Ohio. But I did like that. And even though he didn't say free market, I do think it was kind of related to what we were just talking about
Right.
with business and income and work and stuff. So that's why I brought that up.
So that reminds me of a question then. So
Uh huh.
bringing up Tim Ryan's name, how many people before the debate that you didn't know their names, did you end up knowing their names? Because I didn't know Tim Ryan, and now I know his name. I didn't know Jay Inslee, and I honestly can't remember anything he really said other than now I know his name. And besides that, there were two people in the corner, I think, that one of them might have been Bill de Blasio, which I know him before, but I still don't know what he actually said. I can't remember anything. But beyond that, I never learned anyone else's name.
The shortest woman, I think, I don't remember where she's from. The oldest of the I'm sorry, not the oldest. The older, the middle-aged one. Not Elizabeth Warren, not Tulsi. I don't remember her
Is that
name.
Amy Klobuchar?
Thank you.
And I only know her because a friend of mine said he liked her, and I'd never heard of her name before then or after then. It was only just a friend briefly mentioning her.
All I knew about her going into this is she was a rather successful politician and seemed like someone who was a career Democrat.
Right.
And I know nothing more about her now after watching her talk all night, other than she has a weak voice and a terrible stage presence and will never be president. As far as de Blasio, I knew very little about him, but had seen a few video clips of him before. He basically talked and blathered on about exactly the same kind of boring shit I expected him to, so that was just a non-event for me. As far as the ones I didn't know anything about, I knew nothing about the Ohio guy, Ryan. Nothing at all. I don't even know if I'd ever even read his name, other than I did watch the primer that Subverse put out, because that's Tim Pool's new news thing. I'm sure that our viewers will probably know a lot about that.
Right.
But Subverse is of course Tim Pool's new news group that he's launched finally, and they put out a nice primer. It was like a little 12-minute thing that just told you a little bit about all of the candidates for both last night and tonight, and I liked that. So I knew a tiny bit, like an index card worth of information on all the people going into the debate last night. But that's the first time that I saw Ryan in anything, so I didn't know anything about him. And however, from someone that, to get back around to your original question, the one that I was changed the most about and discovered the most about and will remember is Ryan, because I knew fuck all about him going into it. I don't know fuck all about Ohio anyway, and I did like a lot of the things he said, and he did his best to assert his ideas, which was a very working class, make America great, keep America great type of talk. That I'm old, Nathan. I remember Democrats in the 80s talking like that. I know that you younger kids don't know that because they've been socialists for 20 years. But I actually remember when the Democratic Party was more like the Make America Great Trump platform. So it was nice to see that. And I will probably remember him and what he said and how he felt more than the other no names I knew nothing about. So that's my answer to your question. I know it took a while to get there. Sorry.
But no, bring up anything that comes to mind. I like the tangents.
As far as the guys over on the right side, there was a guy that looked like he was from the same turtle clan of turtle humans as Mitch McConnell on the far right podium.
I think that was Jay Inslee. I think.
Well, let's call him Jay Innsmouth because he looks like an Innsmouth clan. My Cthulhu listeners will enjoy that reference. But I remembered sort of liking some of the things he said, but immediately forgetting them because he was just so goddamn boring and uninteresting. And I think that's a reason he will never have any higher public office, is because even if I like some of the things he said, if it's hard for me to retain his personality or anything he said afterwards, he can't be president. So,
right.
So that, like, I don't hate the guy. I don't remember him saying anything that I found particularly or particularly tasteless or disagreeable. It was just, he was kind of a nothing burger. Kind of like that woman whose name I couldn't remember. She was just kind of yeah, that's a Democrat, and she's talking about Democrat stuff, and she has a weak, forgettable voice, like that kind of crap.
Right. And Jay Inslee, actually, the only reason I didn't know his name throughout the entire debate, I couldn't remember it, but at the end, I was watching, or as I was letting the NBC live stream just play out in the background, I heard one of the commentators talk about, they were discussing the moments and the highlights, and they were like, yeah, there's this guy, that moment that this Jay Inslee guy was caught and accused of mansplaining, or was called out on his mansplaining.
I heard about that.
And the guy pointed out and worded it as Jay Inslee was mansplaining, referring to the point where I guess he said he he was fighting for abortion rights, and I think he might have said he was the only one on the stage fighting for abortion rights, or meaning that he had actually passed something. And then I guess
don't know.
I forget who. I think it was Klobuchar. I can't remember. Called him out on it and said basically, well, what about us? What about us three women on this stage? And that probably didn't help him. And that was the only reason I actually went and looked up his name, just so I could see who it was. But beyond that, I really, after the debate, if not for that moment, I still would not know his name, which is generally hurts you when after debate people don't know your name.
Yeah, let me look up I just pulled up an image that has all the faces and names together. The guy I was talking about was actually John Delaney.
John Delaney. Okay, he might have been the one on the corner.
He was on the far right podium, and he was the one that looks like he's Innsmouth Turtle Clan, like Mitch McConnell.
Again, tells you how memorable he was for me, because I don't remember the name, and I can't remember a single thing he said.
The reason I looked it up was specifically because I thought, once you started talking about the guy claiming the abortion stuff, I was like, no, wait, that's not the guy I was talking about.
Okay.
But Jay Inslee, I found the most insufferable in a lot of ways, and I hate him. So I would milkshake that boomer if I got the chance. That's a joke, of course. I know that the liberalists are going to be mad at me. I would not milkshake anyone. I was just expressing my distaste for him in a playful way. Don't hate me.
There you go. No calling for violence on this chat. It's all jokes.
Hold on. Let me put my Soviet T-shirt on and talk about how milkshaking isn't violence.
There you go. Words are violence, but not milkshakes.
I'll talk about how I love the queers and we shouldn't use violence while I wear a Che Guevara T-shirt who was homophobic and violent as fuck.
So on to the next thing. What was I gonna say? Nobody answered the questions, which can't be expected much in a debate because that's the thing. It's not about just answering the questions. It's about trying to say as many things as you can that'll get the 3-second soundbite that'll go everywhere. So, of course, the pretty much the whole first round, when asked a question, everyone completely ignored the question and just went right to, I am this person, I have this good record. They just laid out their entire platform. And in terms of political tactics, I guess it's not a bad thing because the goal is just to get yourself out there. But it became really annoying really fast for me.
I thought that, well, I've watched a lot of debates and I didn't find the question dodging particularly egregious because I have never watched a high-profile debate where any of them answered the questions well.
Right, my expectations are probably still too high because I know that's something that no debate that doesn't happen in a debate where people just answer the question and that's it.
I also think a lot of it comes with age because I've been paying attention to political discourse since the 90s, and I became really disenfranchised with politics in general in the mid-aughts because after being an adult for a while and trying to keep up with it, you realize that they're all just phony liars anyway, and almost none of them have any integrity, and they'll just say whatever the hell just to try to get a vote. So I don't really I don't have much faith in this kind of thing. So that didn't really bother me because I didn't expect any of them to give a straight answer anyway, and even if they did, they were probably lying.
True. Well, that's just unfortunately just how the debates are, right? The goal is not to go on stage and say what you believe as passionately as possible and maybe people will vote for you. The goal is to go on stage, say what most people want to hear, and then maybe they'll vote for you, and that's it. Like there's not really any incentive to come out and say something really really passionate that's unpopular.
You just brought up, I didn't mean to overtalk you, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Along the lines of what you're talking about not answering questions, the first 30 or 40 minutes of the debate last night, it wasn't a debate. It was like a virtue signaling contest. It was disgusting because as soon as everyone got to go for the first time, even little turtle man, I've already forgot his name. How is it again?
John Delaney.
Even little John Delaney did a little bit of it. And it's just so pathetic that virtue signaling and prostrating yourself at the feet of the diversity goddess has become like just as blasé as saying hello in Democrat land. And I think that's fucking pathetic. And I hate it. I hate it so bad.
It was Castro who, we haven't actually mentioned Castro yet. Castro was the first one, or the only one, I think, to actually say social justice, the phrase, the one to actually throw out the word social justice.
I really don't like that guy because just look at him. He's a Yakuza plant. He says he's Hispanic, but he's Japanese. Look at him. He's one of those clever. He's one of those clever, seditious Asians. We gotta watch him.
That actually threw
I'm
me
just
off
kidding.
because they said they were. That did actually throw me off watching the debate. I'm like, oh, interesting. Like that. They were calling him Hispanic, and I'm like, oh, or no, Latinx. Sorry, Latinx. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Latinx makes me want to slap the computer and say, "Wait, no, you're saying that wrong. What? Latinx? No, that can't be right."
Even the debate moderators didn't say that. They actually did say Latino, Latina, or whatever. And
Yeah.
it was
Hmm.
Castro, I think, was the one that threw out Latinx.
That's that is not a just because I've lived in a Spanish speaking area for a while and I've been connected to queer life for like 20 years. The Latinx thing, it's not specifically a transgender thing. It's an old Spanish speaking feminism thing of let's take gender out of language because it's used
Right.
to oppress us type crap. And I mean, and this rhetoric goes back to before, probably even before I was born in Spanish speaking areas that might have had feminism like Spain or whatever. But when I first learned about it, I wasn't even living in Albuquerque yet, where I lived for a while. I think I learned about the Latinx thing back in like '04, but it
Oh,
was online in a chat room. And I don't think it became part of public discourse until 5 or 6 years later. But the Latinx thing, I think a lot of people now that are of the skeptic anti SJW crew, like us and most of our listeners, they might associate Latinx with like Wimixon and other things that are used by like radical feminists, and they associate that with the non-binary, transgender, intersectional stuff. But that actually comes from radical feminists who tend to be anti-trans stuff. So I just think that's an important thing for our viewers to know, just
interesting.
so they
Yeah.
know where to direct their hate and know, what element of the people they hate certain terms come from.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's interesting. But next, actually, what was I gonna get on? Oh, that was it. Cory Booker. So, like I said, I liked the way he actually used the word free market as a good thing. He actually talked about American values. But what was it? When they asked Tulsi to apologize, when they asked like, explain yourself, basically, explain your past, and then the immediate follow up after she did, which I thought she gave a good answer. The immediate follow up was from Cory Booker, who said that's not enough, and then he went on about, and then he just kept going on about other things, and pretty much
Hmm.
tried to get as intersectional as he possibly could. And it's like if you want to bring up trans Americans, like okay, like that does not bother me in the slightest. But then he kept going on like trans American, especially African American trans Americans or trans Americans, and then just kept going on and trying to include all the different subgroups. And it's
Yeah,
like
that
I
was
don't.
pretty. Go. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It doesn't bother me overall. It doesn't bother me that much because like it really doesn't annoy me or anything like it would annoy certain people on the right. But it's the trying to go as far as possible, the trying to be as intersectionalist as possible, trying to get all the different subgroups in kind of thing. That is when it starts to get a bit upsetting or a bit annoying.
It's a huge thing on the left, the virtue signaling crap. And for all of the problems I have with people on the right and staunch conservatives and shit, at least they don't do that. At least they aren't, you know, pander McPanderstein whenever it comes to
Right.
Jewish crap. Like at least they don't just make grand obeisance to the state of Israel or to big business all the time. So that I since I know a lot about trans stuff, and a lot of my viewers and your viewers especially might not know, I worked both volunteer and professionally in healthcare, and for the
Okay.
last several years, I worked with and alongside I worked for and alongside a trans clinic in Albuquerque. I did a lot of volunteer work in the community. I got to be around medical professionals like psychiatrists and doctors that traveled the country learning about trans this and intersex that kind of stuff. And it is true, just to sort of, I don't know. I know that it was for political virtue signaling purposes,
Right.
but when it comes to African American transgender women, which means biologically male but are transitioning towards female, that particular slice of the pie and demographic does have a ridiculously high poverty, abuse, rape, and murder rate. It's staggering. Like it's really ridiculous, especially in places which, big surprise, that are leftist meccas like L.A. Um, even big cities that even in the South that have a left lean like Atlanta, Houston, that kind of shit. Uh, Black trans women, which for conservative viewers, that means what you would call men who dress and live as women. That demographic, usually in big cities, is a murder, rape, violence factor of 5 to 20 times higher than
Wow.
other demographics of trans people. So Cory Booker isn't wrong about bringing that up as a specific statistic. But I would like to also remind the viewers, all of these leftist twats that pander to the trannies, let me tell you, we are almost non-existent, and it is only a divisive speaking point. There are so few of us that I really think it is a complete disingenuous overture to an almost non-existent fraction of the populace. And if you talk to most of us real trannies, we don't even think it should be an identity or something social anyway. We think it should be treated as a medical psychological problem and not part of an identity and not even part of the LGBT cluster, because the T isn't like the other letters. It doesn't have to do with you wanting a penis or a pussy in your mouth. It has to do with you having a genetic, neurological disconnect with your anatomy. And that's not something that you build a community around, and it's not something that helps you pick a partner or not. So among the people that I have worked with and the actual trans people, and of course I'm going to get called, true scum and trans med by all the, blue-haired Tumblrzers and the stupid non-binary champions, but quote unquote real trans people that I've worked with by the hundreds, they are not a community, they are not a sexuality, they are messed up people that have real problems and they suffer for it. And I don't think any of these politicians, not a damn one, would stand up and say that, because they might not even know it. They might only think that trans is, some cross-dressing weirdo wants to just glue a wig to his head and be a woman full time so he can jerk off every day. Like, that might be what they think internally, but they don't know shit about what real trans is. And actual transgender people, I don't think they want to be a political pundit or someone running for political office's speaking point, or I don't know, LGBT pet item, because almost 100% of the trans patients I've worked with, they don't want their condition to be known. They work hard to fight it. They work hard to fix it. And I don't think it's something that they would want as an identity label or something that they would want talked about openly as something positive. So, and of course, I'm going to get called trans medical and I'm going to get called, a radical or whatever. But from my vast experience with working with trans people across the country, that's my take on it. And so again, I know that I waffled a lot there, but I had a lot to say, and I wanted your viewers and my viewers to know that this isn't just an opinion that I formed from listening to YouTube. It's from real life experience for the last 20 years. So take that for what you will.
But yeah, as to your point, like it is worthwhile to go into a tangent, like I said earlier, because you have actual relevant experience in that field. It's something you haven't just listened to a quick 10-minute YouTube video and now you're talking about that. It's no,
Right.
like this is actually something that you're aware of and something that, hey, better to let people know about. And in
of
that
the
sense,
few hundred trans people that I consider real trans people that I still communicate with, almost 100% of them hate the modern trans rhetoric by both trans activists and politicians, because it has nothing to do with us, and it only hurts us. It doesn't help us.
well, and that's because those people, I imagine, don't spend their entire day complaining on the internet. they have more important things to do, I guess. So it's the people that are, I guess, louder that really that make it seem like they're bigger than they are.
It's a numbers game, Nathan. I'll be honest with you. It's a numbers game.
Right.
Because for every real trans person that has an intersex condition like me, or a neurological, psychological condition that gives someone acute gender dysphoria, for every one of us, there are hundreds of what we call trans trenders that become activists and start screaming about gender rights and non-binary garbage in universities across the world. So, in my opinion, those aren't real trans people. If you discover transness after you learned it in gender class, and then you think that, drawing on a mustache or dyeing your hair and wearing jeans makes you trans, you're probably not fucking trans, and you're probably just going through a phase. Sort of
Right.
like back in the 70s and 80s, they used to call it college lesbianism, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Like the whole college trans and trans movement of the modern era, in my opinion, is directly equivalent to that.
Gotcha. So, in that sense, then it's not even like if Cory Booker were to bring it up, the act of actually bringing it up and saying what he did is not a bad thing as long as it's brought up in good faith. I assume it's like addressing an actual community with issues or with real problems.
True.
But it's the idea that it was brought up during a debate and the entire point was pandering and I imagine virtue signaling. So it's the intent behind it.
And like I said earlier, it's not that his factoids, it's not that his point was based on false facts, because yes, black trannies in America do suffer statistically in every major city by a large factor compared to all other types of trannies. But, you can go back to, 13%, 52%. You can go to, well, of course, because most of these are in crime-riddled, shitty areas, you go the socioeconomic route. You can also go the religious route. Most black communities are more staunchly conservative in the whole religious conservatism department, so there'll be more pushback against trans. Like, there are a lot of reasons for it. So it's not even a good democratic talking point, in my opinion, to bring up that statistic. Even though the statistic isn't fake, I feel like the talking point was just, oh, watch me virtue signal harder than you, and since I'm black, I'm going to win. Ha ha.
Right.
He got to play the training card and the race card at the same time, and he's like, ha ha, you fell for my trap card, pun intended.
That's good. Okay, so what do we
Of course
went
it's
through?
good. I said it.
Yeah. So I'm going through the list, and I think we hit all the major things. I did notice how, of course, when they had to address the idea of Trump's America, the idea of, like, if things are so great, why are you offering change? Why are you offering something different? Mm-hmm. And notice how, like, pretty much the only things they could really bring up was the two by far most regulated and controlled industries, like education, the idea of free education, and healthcare. Mm-hmm. So they had to bring up the two departments where, yeah, really, there hasn't been much change. Like there hasn't really been anything done majorly under. I mean, there was the repeal of the individual mandate, but besides that, they addressed the two things that Trump hasn't really, the administration hasn't really changed much. So it's like the only way you can say he was doing too awful was by attacking the things that are still pretty much unchanged.
I have two things to say about that. One about education, one about healthcare. I'll start with education because it's simpler. Education is something no politician ever does anything about, because children don't vote. And it is a very despicable thing in America, like most nations, that the larger government gets and the more complex bureaucracies get, the more bland that the education gets at the federal level, and how just pathetic and indoctrinating public schools seem to be. And it's not evident in most areas in America yet, but in larger cities it is, because textbooks are being changed. Leftism and statism is replacing, more typical tepid teachers. And you can see it horribly in the UK, France, Germany, how their public education systems, whether they, want them to be that way or not, are basically like socialist indoctrination centers, or at the best, statist indoctrination centers. And in the era of, the millennial crash into, they can't get jobs, they have student debt, they have degrees that don't mean anything. The shine of statism and socialism is starting to really sparkle to a lot of people my age and younger. And I think that's really dangerous. And if there's any major education issue, in my opinion, that should be brought up, is how to fight against the indoctrination and the statism and the purposeful shift of the Overton window in our state education systems. So then again, that's just me maybe being an alarmist, maybe hoping that America doesn't become like Europe. I don't know. But I don't think that you're going to hear a Republican or a Democrat talk about that, because they are part of the statist system and they benefit from it. And I don't know if we're going to see a candidate, whether left or right, in America be libertarian enough to even bring that element up. And the other element is, of course, even though Donald Trump, of course, and his administration hasn't really done anything with education, point to an administration that has in 50 years. Can you? I can't.
No, yeah, exactly. There's it pretty much all goes in a certain direction, and that's the issue with both parties in general, that they don't actually, like, one doesn't, both sides claim to address the point, and it's not even that they have different ideas of how to fix things. It's just that they, like, whatever they say, it never actually happens. Nothing actually goes
It's like
forward.
both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, they both clutch their pearls and say, "Think of the children," but in different ways.
Right.
But they never fucking do anything about it because they don't really care. They care about votes and consolidating a power base and getting rich. Like, that's what they care about. Um,
Well,
and the
we even
second
had
thing.
a
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
in Pennsylvania. We even had a
Mhm.
governor before Wolf, which we're a swing state, so we're a mix of like left and right. You have a lot of the rural conservatives, and then you also have the left in the big cities. We elected a conservative governor that was trying to actually fix education. He would start slashing education funds if they didn't actually address issues, if they didn't improve. The idea, it
Well,
wasn't
that's
just
cool.
start throwing money at things. The idea was to actually do good for actually reform the system instead of just throwing money at it.
Well, party
And
aside, that sounds like a good idea for any state.
yeah, he actually had I think he actually addressed the real issues. He actually had a good plan. And the very next election, he lost in a complete landslide to someone with the exact opposite, that said, no, like, our current governor is just literally just throw as much money as we possibly can at the issue and hope it works. And so you see that as soon as someone actually did get elected, which it was possible to get elected, but as soon as he did, and there was one term, people said no because the schools complained, and the unions, the school unions complained, and the teachers unions, and he
Yeah,
lost the very next election.
that's sad. I think that I think that unions are both good and bad. It's as a libertarian person and someone who tries to stay centrist and care more about the economy and the people at large, it's hard for me to have a firm opinion on unions because in my life I have seen them do good and bad things. And I think in a lot of ways it depends on what kind of union it is and what goals the people running the union have. So a good example of that, there was a small workers union that I got to know through someone in Virginia. And Tennessee and Virginia, I believe, are both still right to work states. So there's not a lot of unions in either place. And I grew up around the border of Tennessee and Virginia. And when I was young, this older guy, I think I was 20 or 21, and I got to know a guy who was in some kind of pipe fitting union or something. And he told me that his union was ran by people that worked in the industry and specifically lobbied to try to get them all to have good unified health care through HMOs and PPOs in whatever state they worked in because they had interstate representation, but they had representatives that worked with insurance agents at a state level to help get the people in his pipe fitters union, uh, you know, good. I guess I guess you'd call it good healthcare benefits these days.
Right.
I don't know what they used to call it back in the 70s and 80s. I don't know, but I know that healthcare is different now, so that doesn't really apply. But I have heard and seen firsthand countenance of what I would consider good implementations of union. And then, of course, you read a lot of bad things about unions where they become corrupt. They try to muscle businesses. They try to influence politicians in like negative, predatory ways. So I don't really have a firm opinion on whether unions are good or bad. I think like any type of institution or structure, they can be good or bad or both at the same time. So I don't really have a firm pro or against union stance, but
Well, it's just like
I do recognize they can be both good and bad, I guess.
it's just like businesses in general, right? You can have tons of good businesses that are run well and do good for the people and treat their workers well, and that, and then you can have the ones that just that once they become a corporate, that grow into a corporation and then buy
Uh-huh.
out all the competition and then lobby for things that prevent the competition from having an upper hand and that kind of thing. You can have the good people that actually do good work and do something good for
Yeah.
the workers, and then you have the people that just they try to
And
take advantage of the
obviously,
workers.
I'm very ignorant about unions. I've never once studied them, so if I actually studied them, I might have a radically different opinion. But
Well, I mean, I've
I,
worked
I
with
can't study everything. So
like, I know people that are like, they're by no means like crazy leftists. All unions
Mhm.
are good all the time, working class thing. They're right wing people, generally like conservative people, that
Hmm.
they like their union because the union
Hmm.
does good for them, and they appreciate it, and they appreciate what the union does to fight for them. So it's like in that sense, those unions are great. They're doing
Hmm.
their job, and the workers really like them. I know where I work. I work in healthcare. We have a union that is one of the biggest healthcare unions in the nation. They're like they give millions of dollars to the left. They lobby heavily for like socialized healthcare stuff, for a lot of government regulations that that they're heavily involved in politics basically, and everyone, like every single person that I know at my hospital hates them. Even the people that started the chapter and brought the union in the first place hate them because they are
That
in
is
place
interesting.
now. They take union dues and they do literally nothing. And the way the contract works out is that it's basically impossible to get rid of them. Even though everyone wants them gone, it's so complicated to actually get rid of them. So in that sense, yeah, I know some people that have great unions that do good for them, and those unions are great. I know we got completely off topic here, but
Oh, that's fine.
which isn't a
No, no,
bad thing necessarily because hey,
yeah,
surprise, you've got information as well if you're listening, then rather than just debate analysis. But in my
right.
sense,
But
like
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
just to completely wrap up, it's like yeah, I know people that it's not politics, it's they really love their union who has done great work
Mhm.
for them, and then there's like my union, which is corrupt to the core and literally everyone hates them.
We wandered really far away from your original question. We got on unions from
I
education,
can't even remember what the
but
original question was.
the original question was you brought up education and healthcare. I
Oh,
want to get
gotcha.
to the second half. Cory Booker actually, he to tie this into the debate stuff. Cory Booker actually mentioned something that is the critical, in my opinion, is the critical flaw with everything wrong in healthcare, and it also sort of dovetails into what I think is wrong with the political machine, the political war machine stuff. Is Cory Booker said he does not take um, super PAC money. He does not take money from anything connected to big insurance and big pharma. And as far as healthcare goes, I am not staunchly against or staunchly for the single payer system, socialized medicine. I am not particularly for or against that because, in my opinion, healthcare has to be what works for the people. Now, a lot of the leftists and a lot of the YouTube lefty pundits that like I like Kyle Kalinske. Don't agree with him on much, but I like him and I try to listen to people of all different camps. And the Social Democrats, Kyle's big in. I think he even helped start them, and they talk about single payer system and how functional it is in other countries. And mathematically and statistically, that is true. So what those countries do not have that America has is an already extant system that, since the massive deregulation era of the 1980s, has been propped up in this house of cards of big pharma, medical tech equipment, and insurance companies. These other nations that have the functional socialized medicine and single payer systems, they did not have to come out from under this horrifically corrupt crony capitalist, I don't even call it capitalist, this crony oligarchical market of healthcare that we currently have. And in my opinion, even though Cory Booker spoke to the evils and the ugliness of that horrific power structure that's literally strangling and raping billions of dollars of profit from sick and dying Americans, and how that money corrupts and controls Capitol Hill, he didn't speak at all as to how to fix it or how to help it. And I think that's because it's almost impossible to. Because coming from healthcare and working in it for a long time, Nathan, excuse me, I can speak to this as a fact. The way that insurance companies and medical equipment companies, hospitals, and big pharma work together, it is such a predatory, mafioso controlled market. It's just as bad as check into cash, payday advance, car title loan, and mafioso loan sharking. It is that bad. And the problem is, it comes from the top down from a small handful of multi-billion dollar insurance, technology, and pharmaceutical corporations that have a stranglehold on the entire healthcare industry. Now, the problem with this is the only way we can bust that up and try to move away from that is with powerful, wide sweeping federal action, because states cannot come for these entities. They don't have the power because all of these entities are not just interstate, but international, most of them. So it's going to take federal action to fix it. But who do you think is greasing the palms of all these politicians on Capitol Hill that are preventing them from ever being under attack? It's, of course, their super PACs and their billions of dollars that they can throw around on Capitol Hill to get their way. So the healthcare problem, now I know that, as a non-statist libertarian type, this will sound weird for me to say, but I think this is one of the few places that we really need a powerful federal force to start making wide sweeping changes and busting up parts of the market, is in these healthcare giants. So I was glad to hear Cory Booker bring that up, and a couple of the other people talked about that too. If you listen to Tulsi outside of the debates, I know she talks about this too, but I don't recall her bringing it up last night specifically. So I could be wrong about that. She might have, but anyway, that's my big take on the healthcare issue and big pharma. And I was glad to hear Cory Booker bring up specifically some of those problems. That made me happy to hear.
Right, and yeah, it's pretty much exactly what you said, right? Like it's down to who's actually going to make the change, because with how powerful and big a lot of and corrupt a lot of the system is in healthcare specifically, it's like who has more influence in actually making change, the people that want the change or the entire healthcare system itself? Because it's all at least when I listen to like the more healthcare economist type people talk about how the system is actually structured, it is like a house of cards. It's in the sense of as soon as you pull something out, and that's a lot of how from what I'm told, I can't speak to the complete reliability of my sources, but they don't seem very partisan. That's how kind of Obamacare was built, where essentially if you pull out one card, the entire thing comes crashing down, and not in a good way. It's not that it goes away; it's that it crashes.
And to play centrist, you can point the fingers at the Republican Party for fighting Obamacare. The reason Obamacare, I'm sorry, not the reason. A part of the reason that Obamacare is such a clusterfuck is all the concessions and all of the shit that got shoehorned into it because of how hard the opposition fought against it. And so you can point the finger in every direction when it comes to all the problems with Obamacare. I would like to give you one quick example from my personal experience, if you'd like to hear it. Sure. At a clinic that I worked at, you know what an MRI machine is, right?
Yeah.
The big magnet thing, and okay. This type of equipment in America is redonkulously expensive. We're talking millions and millions of dollars for one machine, right? In other countries, it's not. But that's not a talk for now. Okay, the clinic that I'm at, they wanted to own their machine. They were a small clinic, so they looked for a source to purchase it. And I don't remember where it was from. It was from like Mexico or Canada or somewhere outside of America. Okay, and I think it was going to cost less than $1 million for the clinic to get the machine. Well, that didn't go through because of two things: insurance and medical tech companies in America, who are, of course, in bed together. Unless you have the millions and millions of dollars to straight up purchase these dramatically overpriced machines from American companies, and they're probably made in China anyway, for all I know, but whatever. The people that sell these expensive machines to hospitals and clinics and stuff, they are in cahoots with the insurance companies, because you aren't allowed to purchase the machines directly, and most clinics can't afford the exorbitant markup to buy them straight cash. You have to rent them, and renting them makes them insured through the insurance companies, who also, at the top end, share lots of board members between the insurance companies and these medical tech giants. So if you go with a machine that is not, quote, up to spec or whatever, in accordance to the insurance companies, you are in violation of that insurance, and they can pull your provision coverage. So what the clinic was running into is we can own our own machine and help us make more money so we can serve the community better and pay our employees better. But instead of being able to buy this expensive machine outright with cash, we are basically forced to rent it and never own it from this medical tech company corporation, because if we try to get it from any other source, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Cigna are going to pull their insurance label with us and we'll collapse as a business. So we are forced to continue paying $20,000 a month in an insurance premium, or we'll lose half of our clientele, or we won't be able to, or we have to try to find another way to save money and subsidize, but we can't, because if we want to go with a machine and not make the insurance company mad, the only one we can buy outright will have to pay an exorbitant like $5 million markup up front to actually own the machine instead of renting it from the only one that would allow us to be served by this insurance company. And if that sounds like a complicated mess that you can't wrap your head around, it's because that's what it is. Yeah. I tilted my head at that for weeks, talking to the RN that ran, excuse me, talking to the RN that ran the division I was, and trying to learn exactly why the people that ran our clinic weren't able to make this all happen. And come to find out, it was because of the insurance and the medical technology power players that basically, at their command, the clinic had to operate within these exorbitant and unfair, like monopolistic, and it reminded me of the guild era back in like the Renaissance times, where these powerful mercantile guilds, it was like, you sell for these prices and you do what we say, or we will destroy your business and you will be poor and your children will starve. Like, that's the vibe that I got from all of that. And I think that there is no way for a state or a competitive market to fix that. So, in my opinion, the only option we have is for some large contingent of a voting bloc to actually try to get people into power at a federal level to bust this shit up and fix it. Sort of like how we need to fix corporate prisons and that shit. So I know that was a lot to talk about. I'm sorry, but I thought that would be important to hear that.
But no, that's the thing. It's a tangent, but it's important to hear, because how many people have actually heard that before now?
And so I think there's a lot of, and millions of women, and I'm assuming traps and gays and shit too. We work in healthcare. We are nurses. We are phlebotomists and shit like that. And so we know firsthand exactly what Cory Booker means when he says, I'm not taking their dirty big pharma money. We all know exactly what he's talking about. And I think that was a really smart play for him to just drop like that, because that's going to appeal to millions of working class Americans that work in healthcare.
Right, and just to throw in, I'll try not to go off for too long, just because I want to go back to like the last one or two things on the debate. Sure. But just to wrap up the healthcare thing, at least like when I've only worked at a hospital for a few years now, but when I talk to the people there, it's like they give me the prices on what certain things cost. Like we had the amount of money that certain things cost, it's like just basic construction, or for certain machines, it's like just quoting the construction costs. And then looking at the actual work that is done, it's like I could have done this for an eighth of the price. I'm not even that skilled in terms of like the construction stuff.
It's because of the monopo state. Like that's a word that I throw around a lot. That, to my knowledge, is the unholy union of these post-dereg era megacorps with government subsidies and super PACs and lobbyist money. They're untouchable. It's not a free market. It's not really even a market at all. It's monopolistic, oligarchical state dominance of business.
Wait, it can't even really be considered a market, because where's the competition? Yeah. Where's the competition at all? You can't get in, because if you want to make a drug, or if you want to compete with a pharmaceutical company and you want to make a drug, or if you want to develop something to compete, it's like the entry into the market is something like millions and millions of dollars.
And millions and millions of dollars that private research companies, like let's say me and you, right? Let's say you and I, let's say that we're dating or we're married, and we come home one day and we find $5 million of legal cash laying in our floor, and we can do anything we want with it. We cannot compete in pharmaceuticals. Right. We cannot compete in running a hospital, because they're almost universally owned by interstate or international conglomerates, and or the same people that own universities. Or we can't even afford to start our own medical tech business because we can't compete in medical technology without leaving this country, because every market option for medical technology and equipment is already dominated and owned and protected by insurance. Like, that's the fucked up thing is, you the equipment you use in healthcare has to meet prereqs that are set at a federal state level, which is both lobbied for and controlled by the insurance companies. So if they don't want you to compete in medical equipment and medical technology, unless you have the millions of dollars to throw around with your state politicians and even more millions of dollars to try to get your foot in the door as a business, you can never get off the ground. Like me and you, if we take that $5 million we find in our living room and we say, okay, well, hey, my grandfather ran a machine shop. I know how to set one of those up. And we start offering at a much lower and competitive price to build pretty simplistic medical equipment for hospitals and clinics in our state. Oh boy, they would come down on us with the wrath of God, and we would not be able to contend. And see, that's why I say we live in a much more socialist country than people recognize, is because we're like a mercantile socialist state in a lot of ways, and there's no possibility to fight the monopoly state along most lines of important business.
On top of that, there's a lot of states that have this certificate of need. I don't know if it's all 50 states or just some of them. It's at least my state. The certificate of need, the idea that if you want to open up, if you're someone with a ton of money, say not just $5 million, but you have enough that you could build a hospital or that you could build a clinic or you could build a facility of some kind, a healthcare facility, and that you could buy all the equipment and all that, you still need to get a certificate of need. And to do that, you need to go to this board of members, and it essentially consists of a lot of basically the people already in healthcare, the people that already they either work for the companies or they are part of the companies, and it's you need to get permission from them and basically prove to them that you need to be their competition. And what are they going to say to that?
Do you know when all that started?
I don't actually.
That started during the massive deregulation era, when states and companies started to get in bed together, and the umbrella, I call it the umbrella up process, is when states and the federal government, after the deregulation era, when companies began to swell and buy up other companies and knock out middle management and then knock out God, what do you call it? Fuck, I can't remember right now. It's been so long since I took an economics class. Fuck. But anyway, in the era of deregulation, you had so many healthcare small things like little PPOs, little HMOs, businesses that have been successful businesses for years. Lots of, local community private practice doctors chipping in their time, going to like a John Deere or a State Cigna healthcare clinic, donating their time while still having their private practice. That system worked because it was local, it was state or community based. And then massive deregulation happened, and you had rich assholes coming into states, buying up all the facilities, putting in place insurance and medical tech. And this was when the big pharma era really exploded. And that's why in the 90s you saw a dramatic spike in opioid addiction and that kind of shit start to crop up everywhere, is because they were just destroying private practices, destroying little PPOs and HMOs that were like, let's say one plant, like you have a glass plant or a metal shop, and that's what your whole town is based around.
Right.
Well, you had doctors and podiatrists and dentists that were from that community that served that community. And then those are almost all extinct now. Those are almost completely gone in this day and age. And that is why you have these certificate of need or whatever, is because they started working with states and unions and government to block any of these little PPOs and private practice communities from rising up again. Because they'll be like, oh, well, there's not a need for another dentist here. There's not a need for a healthcare clinic here, because they'll point to these massive hospitals and say, there's not a competitive need for that. They're already providing it. They already have an ER. They already have an emergent care clinic. They already have a pediatric wing. So you can't start your business here. You have to go somewhere else. And that's why you have almost no little private practice groups anymore, is because of that. And if you go back to the 60s and 70s, I don't even know if you can find any of that certificate of need shit. I don't even think it existed back then.
Right.
I could be wrong about that. This is just me talking from working in the health industry. I don't know.
Well, I'll see if after this I'll see if I can find anything just on when it came into
Sure.
when it came prevalent, and I'll just throw it in the description.
Yeah, for the people that are listening, if you know better and you can directly refute me on any of that, please do, because I love being wrong, because it helps me learn stuff I don't know. So, drop in the comments if I'm completely wrong about what I said about dereg and healthcare umbrella and all that. But from the way that I've learned it, working in it for let's see, 1, 2, 3, working in it for around 15 years, let me know.
Yeah. All right, to get back on track, which I've pretty much gone through all of my notes, but that was good though. That was worthwhile.
Yeah, that was a fun segue. It was a good time.
It's only bad if there's no substance to it, and this was all important.
Yeah.
So the last thing, I think we've pretty much gone through everything I really wanted to say. I guess we could go through the last or winner. We'll go right to winners. Unless you have anything you think we should mention beforehand. But I think
we've been at this for an hour. We should wrap it up.
So over in the end, if you look at the poll or the Google Trends, they showed after the debate, Tulsi Gabbard was trending #1. Now that doesn't trend Democrat voters, that's trending people on Google, which is plenty. Like, it's not just Democrat voters. So in that sense, I did think she came across as the clear winner. Like, that's in my perspective. But I'm on the right. I'm not on the left, so I can't say for sure. I think Cory Booker, like you said, probably came out ahead. O'Rourke, he got a lot of speaking time, so that could have helped him. But he looked very nervous to me. Like, throughout the whole debate, he didn't look at the cameras that much. He looked like he was just very worried, and that's how he came across to me, at least. And actually, when he made a point and someone called him out on that point, he immediately looked at the floor. Like, he didn't look the guy in the eye. He didn't stand. He looked right at the floor, which, regardless of whether he was right or wrong, that to me, that's just like that's not
a
something,
very strong position.
we're gonna have O'Rourke. We're gonna have President O'Rourke, Macron, and Trudeau in a room, and they're all just gonna stand around nervously.
tepidly virtue signaling when they build up the courage. I think Tulsi was the clear winner. I would like to say again, I know that a lot of our viewers will probably be upset and have their feathers ruffled, but I thought Cory Booker looked really strong last night. If there was anyone who looked like a winner as much as Tulsi, I think it would be Cory Booker. He spoke confidently and clearly. He talked about things that I think will resonate with millions of working class Americans, whether left or right. He stuck to his points. And I think that despite the virtue signaling, what little virtue signaling he did, I still think that he's going to have a much more centrist and cross-party appeal than a lot of the other candidates would, especially because he didn't drone on about, guns are evil and, abortions for everyone, ha ha ha. Like, he didn't go on like that, and I think that that's going to, by default, make him look much more appealing to middle of the aisle and right-leaning people than any of the other candidates. So if I had to pick a clear and obvious winner, I obviously would say Tulsi, like you, but I think that might just be because you and I have a right bias in a lot of ways. But just trying to step away from my own bias and think about what it's like to be a normie and not balls deep into this shit like we are every day. Like, I think that Cory Booker is going to have a lot of just universal, regular American appeal. So I would put him as a winner, probably to the normies, probably tied with Tulsi, is what I would say.
Right. I mean, I think we've made it pretty clear that you and I are both right-leaning, or we're not a fan of a lot of the stuff said here. So it's hard to that's the bias we're coming from. And it is hard to separate that because, again, of all the people in this, of who I agree with the most, Tulsi I find the least objectionable. But just thinking, I'm trying to think of just, regardless of what I actually think, she stood very confidently. She's someone that I can see, if she was president, she would actually be able to give speeches and talk to people and do diplomacy and would actually do a good job of it. She's someone that has the very confident approach in how she stands. And like I said,
as someone like you, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you can finish. Go ahead.
As someone like you who is big picture wise probably leans right farther than most LGBT people, the things that I think are important for a state leader, especially a president, to have, I think that identity politics and pandering to, now this is going to make me sound ugly in a way, but pandering to small minorities, I think is an ugly, disingenuous speech tactic and campaign tactic. Now, I'm not saying that since I'm white, I don't care about minorities. That's not. I don't mean it that way. I think it's a despicable tactic to get on stage and pander to the trans, pander to feminists, pander to intersectionals. Talking about wage gap, this feminism, that. It's disingenuous because that is a tiny fraction of the populace. Vast minority of women identify as intersectional feminists or radical feminists, and the intersectionals and the radical feminists are the only ones that pipe on about wage gap and white feminism and that kind of shit. And then you look at the LGBT stuff. I think that the vast majority of American gays don't give two shits about the particular infightings of different tranny clusters or trans medical idea versus transgender theory in universities and stuff. But that rhetoric panders to such a tiny sliver of the populace. I was glad to see Tulsi completely ignore and refuse to talk about wage gap. I was glad that she not once brought up any specific trans or gay intersectional terminology. I was very happy, and I think that alone is going to resonate with not just a lot of centrist and right-leaning Americans, but a lot of LGBT Americans are going to like that too, because they're going to look at her and say, okay, well, she clearly isn't a fuck that hates us, but she's not using us as some kind of political speaking point or to get brownie points with the Dems. And I think that's going to go really far with the general queer vote in America. So that's my take on that as a queer.
Right, and I hope, like, maybe I'm just being optimistic and just letting my own bias take control, but I think she she actually probably does have a chance now, oddly enough, that I wouldn't have said that before. Too. But like, she came out very well, and like you said, she what she says is something that, whether you're centrist, whether you're on the left, or you're a small minority group, that's something that, like, this is something all people can get behind. You don't have to specifically pander to a group and mention them over and over and over again to get political points to appeal to them. That's not necessarily what you have to do. And that might not even be the best idea.
Yeah, another thing that's important around the intersectional and queer theory college people, that rhetoric, it only exists in a nose in the air, upper crust, champagne socialist type of environment. Like, you go to just, like, and I'm talking about among queer people. You go to working class trannies, working class gays from working class communities and families. They don't give two fucks about gender theory and arguing about bullshit. Like, you're talking about a very tiny percentage of a tiny percentage of people already that are going to care about that. And I think that it is blatantly obvious pandering and borderline lies for any politician to act like they care about anything that's radical feminist or intersectional feminist, because when you look at how that stuff comes out in the data, you're talking about like 1% to 3% of the populace who are registered Democrats. So that's like what? Between half and 1% of the country that actually give a shit about that kind of talk. And that's why I think it's a complete missing the point and just it's just masturbatory, honestly, for these politicians to talk about these buzzwords and this radical feminist and gender theory shit.
Yeah, so I think we covered pretty much everything. If we haven't, there's another debate tonight, so there will be even more chaos. And we've got Bernie, and we've got Andrew Yang, and we'll get Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So that'll be.
We're going to have Creepy Joe and Grandpa 1% going at it.
Exactly. So I will leave all of your stuff in the comment section, in the description, a link to your channel, a link to pretty much all your channel, not just YouTube, but this is going to be on YouTube and BitChute, and might as well throw it on mines as well. Sure, why not? So I'll leave a link to all your stuff. Everyone listening, hit check the description, hit all the buttons, hit all the subscribe buttons.
I am on all of those platforms, Mines, BitChute, Gab, all of them, as Yizz the Eunuch. You can find me there by that name.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I just put out a request saying, like, hey, anyone want to chat with the debate on me or debate with me? And you jumped on the opportunity, and it's like, I could not have thought of a better person to debate this about, or to discuss this about. This is fantastic.
Thank you very much, and I had a wonderful time, and I definitely look forward to more discussions like this with you and hopefully others in the future.
So do I. There will definitely be more. All right, take care.
Goodbye, and God bless.